Does it work? Is it working? Test. Test. Oh, testing. Testing. Yeah, I can hear it.
I can turn it up too if people can't hear.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay. Is it? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to open with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we just thank you, God, for this church, for your church. We thank you that you love your church. We thank you that this church loves you. And I just thank you that you want us to be prepared for the people that you have to come here. And we know that this is kingdom work. And so I just pray, Lord, that you'll help me to reflect the things that you would have me to say, and that it would make sense and be understood, and that it would be helpful, Lord. And in Jesus' name, amen. All right. So first of all, I'm just going to kind of tell you what the class is going to look like. First, I'm going to talk about a few specific disabilities. Specifically, I'm going to spend a lot of time speaking about Down syndrome and autism. And then I'm going to talk about what these people enjoy, who they are, what they're like, how to communicate with them, and then we're going to talk about how to best support them and serve them and their families. And at the end, I'm going to finish by saying why this is important for the church. So a little bit about me, if you're wondering how I know anything about it. I actually grew up, I did not have any special needs friends. I didn't have anybody in my family with a disability at all, unfortunately. Wish I did. But I grew up and went to Bible school. After Bible school, I went on a mission trip. My husband and I went on a mission trip to Ecuador, and we were supposed to be serving in an orphanage. When we arrived there, all the children had been put in homes for Christmas, so we couldn't serve in the orphanage that we had prepared for. And they gave us a new mission, and it was to work with special needs kids. And I had never done that before, and we were assigned to help with the Navidad party. So that was really cool. and my first experience with them, and just dancing with them and experiencing their joy for the first time. So it changed my life. After that, I became the director of a day activity program with, in my time there, 8 years, we had over 300 clients with developmental disabilities. It's just a activity program, recreational program, in which we did all kinds of things: drumming, art, fitness, social activities. And through that, I just made a lot of friends with disabilities, made a lot of friends with their families. And even when I wasn't at work, we were doing karaoke nights, bowling days, going to the movies, that sort of thing. And they're still lifelong friends of mine. I ended up getting a degree in human services, helping people help themselves, and joined the Mayor's Committee for such a long name. The Mayor's Committee for Creating and Sustaining Opportunities for People with Disabilities. So it's just kind of making the community more open to people with disabilities and more inclusive. So that's a little bit about me. These pictures, you are wondering why they are here. These pictures just remind me of my clients because these are some of the things they really love, especially people with Down syndrome. They really love theatrics and drama, and so you can imagine they're really fun to hang out with. This presentation is not completely exhaustive. I'm not a neurologist and I'm not a scientist, so it's really just a collection of my stories and experiences and what I've gained from having a lot of friends with these disabilities. So my hope is that you'll just take something away. It's going to be a lot of information thrown at you, but I hope you take something away and use it in your own ministries and in your own lives. And I hope that you'll be prepared for when you meet someone with a disability. So I'm going to start by saying what a person with Down syndrome is not, just to clear the air a little bit. So someone with a disability in general, a developmental disability, is not someone who is sick. They are not, woe is me, they need a cure, that kind of a thing. One of my clients' dads told me a story about when she was little. She has Down syndrome. They were at the playground, and pretty soon all of the children that were on the playground were kind of called away from her. And the parents started whispering amongst each other, and they finally approached him, and one of them asked, "What's wrong with her?" And he said, "Nothing, she's fine." And then, "Oh, well, she has Down syndrome, if that's what you mean." And he said, "Oh, is that contagious?" This is a really common, it's very more common than you think. I've heard these stories a lot. But really, Down syndrome is, it's just something that they're born with. So without being a scientist, I'm going to try to explain. In your DNA, every chromosome has 2 pairs. And Down syndrome just means you have 3 pairs, 3 parts of the 21st chromosome. I call it the love chromosome. It's the extra chromosome there. So it's called trisomy 21. There are also 2 other kinds of Down syndrome that are more rare. One is called translocation, and that is just you have an extra chromosome of the 21st chromosome, but it's been placed somewhere else in the DNA. The most rare is called mosaic, and actually people with mosaic Down syndrome, it's like less than 1%, and they don't even look like they have Down syndrome, so it can be very rare, and what it is just some of their cells have 3, and some don't. So when someone has Down syndrome, pretty quick after you have a baby with Down syndrome, they're going to show you all their chromosomes and show you which one you have. So it's very interesting in that way, but it's not a mistake. It's how God made them. By the way, I work with adults, so I don't work with children. So if at the end of this presentation, we're going to have a Q&A, and we have Neely and Krista here who can also help me answer some of your questions that might be just questions that are on your mind about it. So they are not They're not sick. Implying that someone with Down syndrome has a sickness is very offensive to someone with Down syndrome. A grown-up child. I think Laura talked a little bit about this. You know, we all have our own interests. Some of us like to color. Some of us like to read feminist novels. So, you know, whatever it is your thing, and you want one day of the week to go do that activity with your friends. It's the same for anybody with a disability. If they have an interest that is not age appropriate, it's actually their right to still be able to do that. So it's unfair to say that just because they like doing things that are for a younger age group, that they are a grown-up child. So we don't really say that. Also, when your child gets like a special needs assessment to get like a special education benefits or that kind of thing, you're going to get an IQ number. And an IQ number is also limiting. It doesn't tell us anything about who they are socially, creatively, or emotionally. So I just say, you got to give them more credit than that. A person with Down syndrome is just like you and me. So you would talk to them like anyone else. They're creative, they have a good sense of humor, and I would also add that they have a positive attitude. At work, like my clients would say, "Where's Ruben?" And I'd say, "Oh, he's at work today." And they'd say, "Oh, fun." Like, just how fun. Just always everything is very exciting. And so you can imagine why I like going to work, because and Rainbow Acres as well, and it's kind of similar as when I walk in and I say, "Look, I got a new shirt," and it's like flood of compliments, and you just feel so good about yourself. So it's really nice. So they are also individuals, and I'm telling you about the disabilities right now in this presentation, but you can't just read someone's file and know who they are. So I'm telling you a very broad description of Down syndrome, but it doesn't mean that that's every single person. They are highly receptive, so people with Down syndrome have an uncanny sensitivity to people's feelings. So if I have one client in the room begin to cry, everybody starts hugging each other, everybody's crying. It's very quick. They're very empathetic. So the same thing can turn around. If I get one of them to laugh, the whole room is laughing. So it's pretty quick to change that way. They can be stubborn and compulsive. Rituals and routines are really common and really helpful for them, and actually a variety of disabilities, but this can cause a resistance to change, which can be kind of maddening for their caregivers or the people that love them. They are organized. The word that I would use to describe someone with Down syndrome, the first word I would say is elegant, because they are so clean and neat always. Very clean people. They are punctual and reliable. They are going to be your best employees. They're going to be loyal to their job. They can track 6 or 7 calendars accurately at one time. And that brings me to the point of time. Time is a little bit too abstract for a lot of people with developmental disabilities. So on our clocks at work at Willow Place, which is the program I ran, we would have little arrows all along the clock for all the different things that they were anticipating through the day. A yellow arrow on the 11 for lunchtime, or a red arrow on the 4 for when their buses arrive, that kind of thing. So that sort of thing can be helpful. But people with Down syndrome speak in present tense, so that can be confusing if you've never met someone with Down syndrome before. When a loved one dies, it's hard for them to move past the funeral, for example, or some really emotional point in their life. So we often use photo albums of good times, and that can really help. Soon means nothing to them. So if you say, "Soon I'm going to be coming to visit," that could be today, sometime at this point. I'm going to go get ready for you to arrive. So that's why when we promise something to someone with Down syndrome, we follow through, and we never put something on the calendar too early. They are, like we talked about this morning, or Scott and Laura talked about, is all people with disabilities have the same ambitions and dreams that we have. When we're young, we want to grow up and be a rock star, or we want to be an NFL player, or whatever it might be. And some of these dreams we know are pretty lofty, but we also have dreams to get married and go to college and live independently. And actually, they have the same dreams as us. And by the way, these things are attainable for people with disabilities today, in today's world. They're honest and direct. They are not politically correct. I love them for it. They just tell you what, they just tell you like it is. And I always used to say that going to work is like going to heaven for the day, because it's like this utopia. There's no barriers. If someone gives you a hug, it's just a hug. There's nothing underneath that other than, I care for you and I want you to be happy. So I love that they don't have any social barriers in that way. It's just a very real environment. No one's putting up a front. They also they give quick forgiveness, and I really received a lot of undeserved grace. You cannot imagine how many times in a decade that I ran someone who was in a wheelchair into a wall. And I just, how many times you just feel so incredibly awful, but it's okay, and they just move on. So they live long and healthy. Actually, in the 1900s, life expectancy for someone with Down syndrome was only 9 years old. And today, they live to 54 on average. Yeah, so they are lifelong learners. Everybody with a disability is a lifelong learner, and a lot of people don't believe that. And I saw so much this would be a very long presentation if I told you, but there was a young 5-year-old boy in a car accident, and he arrived at our program when he was 30. He had no use of the right side of his body, and over a course of a few years, he was using the right side of his body again. He only had less than half of a brain. So I've seen someone with fetal alcohol syndrome, meaning that his mother excessively used alcohol in the womb, and he was mostly nonverbal, always smiling, but he would not ever shoot a basket on the basketball court. He would always walk the basketball to the hoop and put it in, and it took years to get him to release the ball and stay put and release it. But he learned it, and I've also seen people with disabilities begin to understand really kind of abstract theological concepts like the Trinity, and these things are possible if you just spend time with them. Other challenges for people with Down syndrome. Most caregivers or guardians would say that they really understand the language that their loved one uses, but strangers can't understand them that well. So they have big tongue, little mouth, and sometimes their speech is stuttery or slurring, and it's really tempting to speak for them and translate for them, but that doesn't help them to be able to strengthen their own confidence. They process slower, and it's tiring to repeat the same thing over and over again. But I just encourage everybody, who works with people with Down syndrome to give them the opportunity to try and to speak. They move at their own pace. This is like my favorite thing about them. They've taught me so much patience and slow down, smell the roses kind of thing. One time we had a bus driver. The bus drivers were always rushing them out the door. And one bus driver was rushing one of my clients with Down syndrome, and she just turned to him and she said, "You people are always in a hurry." And what she meant when she said "you people," she means you people who don't have Down syndrome. And so I would tell them, actually, this is rushing. She is hurrying as fast as she can. We can learn from this. We can understand what matters and slow down and enjoy the process and love people. They do have fewer job and school opportunities. After COVID, they were the first people to lose their jobs. They were dispensable to the world. Even though they're the best employees, like I said, they don't have as many opportunities as we do. but they're going to be the ones who do the jobs we don't want to do. They're going to be the ones who, and people with autism too, they enjoy just repetitive work, putting clothes on the hangers, that kind of thing over and over again. They are not going to tire. They're going to be proud they have a job. So yeah, if I had a business, I'd be hiring them, that's for sure. Health-wise, actually people with Down syndrome are healthy as a horse. They are actually typically very healthy people. Like I said, they care for themselves really well, so they don't have a lot of health problems. But when someone receives the diagnosis, maybe in the womb, your baby's going to have Down syndrome, the first reaction is, oh no, they're going to be in pain. They're going to be sick. It's actually not true. When they're first born, a lot of times people with Down syndrome have a heart impairment, and they do need open heart surgery at birth a lot of times. So a lot of people with Down syndrome have a scar. But as they grow older, they're perfectly healthy. They the main issues I would say that people with Down syndrome have has to do with eating habits. They can gain a lot of weight, become obese, sleep apnea, some gastrointestinal issues, that kind of thing. But otherwise, they're pretty healthy. They're extremely flexible. I've seen people with Down syndrome just go into the splits, and they're so healthy. So it always shocked me when I first met them because of the preconceived notions I had of them. People with Down syndrome, God has made Down syndrome and Alzheimer's connected. So everyone with Down syndrome will get Alzheimer's in older age. But what God is using with that, I don't quite understand it scientifically, but there's something that scientists are able to do right now where they take people with Down syndrome and study them and heal Alzheimer's. So it's pretty amazing. There's that connection there. Key psychosocial issues. A lot of my clients, not just people with Down syndrome, a lot of these kind of intermix. They have a hard time expressing their feelings, or if they have a physical pain, where it hurts, that kind of thing. I'll just draw a chart of a human body and say put an X where it hurts. And that really helps with the confusion of what's happening physically and expressing that. Self-talk. Self-talk meaning they talk to themselves. They talk out loud. If you are not familiar with that, it can be a little bit surprising or scary maybe, but it's actually really healthy and really good. Psychologically, typically developing children, they talk to themselves, but they're supposed to stop at age 7, and people with Down syndrome don't. They continue to talk to themselves. And about 2 feet away from someone they think, well, this is a private space, so they'll just talk about you like you're not there. And they'll just say it out loud. We had a lunch with one of our friends with Down syndrome was at our house. It was me and her and the 2 kids. And one of my kids, my daughter was probably 5 or 6, and she interrupted when my friend was speaking to me. And she was like, "Mommy," and interrupted, as kids do. And my friend was completely stunned that she would be interrupted. She just put her hand over her head and turned her head and said, "That was rude. She shouldn't have done that, but that's okay." And then she carried on. So this is what I mean. It's this is how they process. It's actually nothing to fear. When someone starts talking to themselves, I'll have people cross the doorway, just shut the door to the bathroom and just start ranting about me, just angry with me. And it helps them, and then they come out and they're just happy as anything. So, but the problem with this is that people with Down syndrome are still being prescribed medications for talking to themselves, and these are causing other side effects and that sort of thing. But really, it's actually a strength. It's a good thing. They have great memory, visual spatial memory. So I always say, you walk into a room and you forgot what you're here after. They don't, because they only are thinking about one thing at a time. So when they're walking to that room, they know exactly what they're doing. And if you interrupt them, they'll say, "I'm busy," and they're doing that exact thing. It's incredible. And so they really have perfect visual imagery. When people with Down syndrome are bored, a lot of times they'll sit there and imagine a TV scene, a scene from a movie or TV show, very clearly, and they'll even speak it to give themselves some interaction. They're bored. They're not having fun, so they're playing a movie in their head. This can be confusing for caregivers because like you can't kind of differentiate what's real and what's from a movie sometimes. And I did have one client come in with Down syndrome, come into the Willow Place just devastated, just bawling. And I said, okay, calm down, what's going on? And she said, my mother's been taken to prison. And I said, she has? Marge? She's 90 years old. I said, Marge, she's been taken to prison? I said, I don't think this is true. I can't imagine. She's a lovely Christian lady. What did she do wrong? She just couldn't believe, she just devastated. Pretty soon, I got out of her. This was an episode from Law and Order that she had witnessed earlier, and it made her upset, and she was thinking about it the whole time on the bus. So they have some independence issues. You know what a lot of people with disabilities do? Just as Laura was already saying, they want to be independent, but the world doesn't always allow for this. How should I act around people with Down syndrome? Okay, so let them speak for themselves. Don't interrupt them. If you do, we call it the circles of hell. They restart at the top. Okay, it can be like this. How many times a day are you going to tell me what you're going to have for lunch? Or how many times a day do I have to hear about your birthday? It's in 4 months. You know, that kind of thing. But if you interrupt, they're just gonna start again. This is my own impatience. And whenever, I've got 20 people with autism in the room and one person is specifically trying to tell me something over and over, and I really just would like them to be quiet, one time I said, okay, I'm going to give you this stack of Post-it notes, and every time you think of something you really need to tell me, just write it down, and you can give it to me at the end of the day. That was a mistake. At the end of the day, I walk over to my desk, and it's completely covered in yellow Post-it notes. Actually, the wall behind my desk was also covered as well with notes, so I didn't do that again, but you just got to take time and listen and be patient. So I always say, assume competence. Give them the highest weight, and if they need help, help them. If you see someone at church with a disability really struggling with something, instead of doing it for them, say, do you need help or do you got it? That's kind of how I usually would say. It's just from the first day that these children are born, they're told what they can't do. And their parents even receive money for the things that they can't do. You actually receive more benefits in the state of Washington, where I'm from. I don't know about Arizona. You receive more benefits for your child the more they can't do. So it's very tempting for caregivers to downplay the strengths of their children. But too little help and too much help they're both unproductive. Either way, they're going to get bored or lost in some way. So doing for yourself, it prevents helplessness. Being positive and direct. They don't have an awareness of sarcasm, which I'm a pretty sarcastic person, so I had to learn this the hard way. One of my clients asked me, for Thanksgiving, how many pies should I bring? And I said, bring 12 pies. And I was just completely teasing. And later on, I got a phone call from the parent. I don't think we're going to be able to bring 12 pies. And yeah, so you just have to be like, you cannot say, that'll be $5, because they really will try to give you money and that kind of thing. And I also had an experience with a client who I had a lot of tribal members, and they get fishing free. They get to go fishing in Washington State more regularly than someone who is not a tribal member. And so I said, hey, bring me a fish when he was leaving. And the next day, I had a king salmon on my desk, and I had to try to keep it cold enough until I got home from the fridge. Keep an open mind. My mom never wanted to come to Willow Place. She missed out. She never got to come and see what I did for a living, and it was because she said, I don't want to be hugged all the time. And I said, Mommy, all you have to say is, I don't want to hug, and they won't hug you. So it's really just keep an open mind, but they are understanding of that. Unfortunately, I have to talk about. I can't talk about Down syndrome without talking about abortion. 75% of U.S. women terminate their pregnancy when they find out that their baby has Down syndrome. Only 6,000 babies with Down syndrome are born each year in the U.S., 700 in the U.K., and 4 in Denmark in 2017. They don't have any information since then, and none in Iceland. I mean, there is no one born with Down syndrome in the whole country. That is not because there were not any Down syndrome babies created that year. So the new thing in the UK is that abortion laws in the UK, you can abort up to 24 weeks unless your baby has a severe impairment. And that can include anything, even a cleft lip, a cleft palate. And you can abort all the way to birth. So this has been challenged in recent years by people with Down syndrome and people with children with Down syndrome. And they have gone and taken it to the high court and really got a lot of media behind them. Like, this is totally prejudice, and you're revealing these real prejudice that you have against people with Down syndrome based upon this law. And by the way, these laws, they lost. All of those court cases lost, and that law is still in action. What can change these statistics? Spending time with people with disabilities. If you are arguing that people with disabilities, it's totally acceptable to be killed before they are born, you are revealing that you have some prejudices against this population. Obviously, we believe that abortion in general is wrong, but this is discrimination actually, like, in policy and accepted. Education. So I started up a special needs Bible study at my church, and we went to that church for many years, and I had many, many close friends who were godly people, and they would not help me do this Bible study. Why? Because they would always say, I'm so sorry, but I'm not the right person to talk to them because I just don't know what to say, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. So just a little bit of education. This is why I'm doing this, so that it goes a long way, and hopefully it will just help you to become a little bit more familiar and comfortable with it. Supporting special needs parents. There's a ministry that supports women who get a diagnosis in the hospital. It's a group of Christian parents with special needs children, Down syndrome children, who bring gift baskets to them and say, I know this is not what you expected, but it's going to be good. It's going to be okay. And they support them throughout the way and tell them that Down syndrome people are valued. So if these ministries don't exist in our churches, then people with family members with special needs, people are not going to feel that support in the church. I'm going to talk about autism. We are all different, but some differences can't be seen. God makes all of our brains to work differently. That's why we're all good at different things. If you've ever seen, those, it's kind of like a mind puzzle. You look at it one way and it looks like a witch. You look at it another way, it kind of looks like a princess. Those kind of ones. This is used a lot to show you how autism works. They see things differently. They see the same thing you're seeing differently. And everyone processes differently. 1 in 59 children are diagnosed with autism. This is increasing. So chances are you know someone with autism and you just don't know it. That's why, for this reason, it's important to know a little bit about it. Autism is called a spectrum disorder. That means that there's a variety of what autism looks like. Autism can be very different for a variety of people. High-functioning autism may not even be apparent, and you won't even know that person has autism by looking at them or even talking to them. It can go all the way to being severe or low-functioning autism, which may mean that someone is nonverbal. They don't speak at all, or they just have a completely different disability. Many autistic people they're incredibly smart, and I'll just tell you, I have so many wonderful friends with autism, but I'll just tell you about one guy. He specifically, when he takes a 1,000-piece puzzle, he shakes it up, and he looks at the picture, and he looks for the very center puzzle piece in the puzzle, and he finds it, and then he looks for what goes around that, and then what goes around that, and what goes around that, all the way to the outside. And he is the same guy who can play a piano recital without missing a single note. And he can copy a drawing incredibly accurately. Even if my 4-year-old drew it, he would draw it exactly like my 4-year-old drew it. That same person doesn't speak. He doesn't even talk. They say he's nonverbal. He talks sometimes, but he usually does not speak. He has difficulty making friends, and sometimes he can't even sit still. He can't even stand on one foot. But all the things I just told you, he has a variety of incredible skill sets. So people with autism have difficulty, like Laura was talking about, different sensory triggers. Some things are just too loud or too bright for them. And for someone with autism, the dinging of a bell is a sound that is sent straight to the front of their brain. And it's very distressing for them. For this reason, they have coping behaviors. Coping behaviors are just like you and I, if we're anxious, we drum our fingers, or I bite my cheek when I'm nervous. Different things that we do, right? Whistle or hum. For an autistic person, it looks a bit different. It might be arm flailing, clapping, rubbing their hands together tightly, rubbing their necks, jumping, repetitive sounds, yelling out words that are distressing to them, roller coasters, loud sounds, that kind of thing, over and over again. So if you see someone doing this, I've actually even seen banging their heads on the wall, that I didn't appreciate. But these kind of things, it doesn't always mean they're angry. It sometimes means they're really happy, they're really excited, or they're nervous. So when you see someone doing this, there is no need to be afraid. An example that I have of that, sorry, I need some water. I don't know how you do this for an hour. An example of that in my own life. I brought a 13-year-old boy with autism to church with me one week. And he did fine during the worship. And then during the sermon, I gave him his iPad and his big headphones, noise-canceling headphones. And I knew he'd be fine. And he was doing fine. He moved to the next seat, and he was still on there. And he moved to the next seat, and he was still on his iPad. And then he began to rock back and forth in the chair. But he was totally engaged in his iPad, and he wasn't going to disturb anybody. But I could just feel this tense feeling. Like everybody in the room was like staring at us. And then pretty soon the people behind me, I noticed they scooted their chairs back. And I was like, oh, I just want to tell them it's okay. But it was like the sermon was going on and it was kind of dark. And so I tapped on him and I said, come sit closer to me. And he sat closer to me, but he kept rocking in the chair because he was loving his game. And then I grabbed him and I said, let's go into the foyer. And as I started to go into the foyer, the woman behind me tapped me on the shoulder and said, thank you. She said, thank you for leaving because I was feeling uncomfortable. I didn't know that woman, but if it was my first time ever in a Christian church, or in that church specifically, and he was my son, I would never return. I would never come back to that church. And this is the experience of a lot of people, unfortunately. How should I act around people with autism? Do not ignore them or get angry or laugh at them or speak about them like they're not there. They can hear you. Don't touch them without asking. Pretty much all of these things is how you would treat anyone, I think. So that's just kind of the way to think of it. Be patient, assume competence. And the same things I was saying for Down syndrome. Clear communication. If you're ever working one-on-one with an autistic person, repetition is very important. One of my autistic clients, Tyler, recently started this obsession with refilling his water bottle from the watering jug over and over again, obsessively. And I kept asking him to only please refill it one time, and he just kept filling it up, and there was no stopping him. And finally, I wrote him a note, and on it said, Tyler can fill up his water bottle one time at Willow Place. And then from then on, it was a rule, and it was written down, and he never refilled it more than once after that. The rules are really helpful for them because it's a ritual, becomes something that is a habit. One of my clients, James, at the end of the day, his handshakes kept getting longer. One day he would fist bump, and then the next day he would say, Rachel, fist bump, and then he would do high five, and then psh, or whatever he was doing with his hand, and then it just kept getting longer and longer. And I was like, okay, and he couldn't get on the bus without doing all these things. And so finally I said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna say one time, one bump, one psh, see you later. And then, so that was our ritual that we did every time he left. And because it was this like rule, that never changed. Do remember that all the things I've just spoken about, it doesn't mean that they're broken or that they're ill. They're just different. They're just different from us. Other disabilities that the church might come across. I am new to this area, so I don't know what to expect here in Camp Verde, but these are just some of, I put these on here because these are a lot of the most common disabilities I would work with. People with cognitive delays, that's just, we don't say mental retardation anymore. That's a term that isn't used anymore. We use the term developmental disabilities. I'm gonna kind of talk a little bit about, just a little note about terms real quick. And whatever you get out of it, it's okay. You don't have to memorize all of this, but I think it's really helpful to embrace the right speech. There are two different ways to speak about disabilities. Person-first language is what most people prefer. Person-first language meaning instead of saying disabled person, you say person with a disability. So person comes first. Instead of saying autistic person, you say person with autism. That's person-first language. A lot of people appreciate that. But in recent years, the Americans with Disability Act was created, and it was a huge group of people with disabilities themselves who got together and they were like, I'm not ashamed of my disability. I don't want to be called a hearing impaired person. I want to be called a deaf person because I'm not offended by that. I'm deaf. It's okay. I'm proud of that. That's who I am. So they started language called identity-focused language. And you don't want to like offend someone, so you're not sure what to say. But just ask, because people really appreciate it when you go up to them and say, hey, I don't want to be disrespectful. What would you like me to how would you like me to call the disability that your child has? Would you like me to say autistic person, or do you prefer this term? That kind of thing. I would just say, over all of that, the most important thing is never call someone their disability. Don't say that Down's kid or wheelchair over there. You know what I mean? Because that is disrespectful. But most of the time, people totally honor the fact that you're trying and that you care about, you're in doubt, and so you're asking and you're trying to show the value of that person. A lot of people in the community might have some of these disabilities here. Cerebral palsy, that's just a disability that will happen in the womb. Usually the spine is not completely developed. People with cerebral palsy tend to not walk on their own, unaided, so a lot of people with cerebral palsy are in a wheelchair. Seizure disorders, I just want to touch on that a little bit because you can't see who has a seizure disorder unless necessarily like if they always wear a helmet or something like that. But if someone who we knew in our church had a seizure disorder, you might need to start being aware of this sort of thing, right? So just as when we have a child in the classroom who has a nut allergy, we say, hey, let's not bring peanuts into this classroom. If someone has a seizure disorder, hey, let's make sure that there are rows of chairs that are not going to fall into a wall if someone were to go into an episode. I think of these things because I'm paranoid because I spend a lot of time in these kind of situations. But as we're around people with these disabilities, we consider it more. Another thing would be like to have a basket of noise canceling headphones at the front of the service. So if someone really was struggling with like loud noises or something, that would be available to them. I'm not saying change our whole church right now, but it's just some ideas. I spent some time at a church that held a special needs Sunday school. It was called Sunshine Sunday School. It was the only one I knew of in Washington State, and they had a special room. It was like what you would think of as like a nursery room. It had just like a glass wall that you could see the service from, but it was a quiet room. So it wasn't a crying room. It was a room where people who are louder won't be disrupting the rest of the congregation, but they could still be in the service. So these things are just things to consider. 3 basic rules of respect. Connect, consider, communication. Make eye level when you're speaking to someone. I always say, if someone's in a wheelchair, wouldn't it be nicer to just get down when you're speaking to them so they can see you? Ask if they need help or not. I kind of already touched on that. Remember that we view every behavioral change as communication. So they're trying to tell you something if they are making a loud noise, or they're rocking back and forth, or they start randomly jumping. Don't be afraid, but clear communication. Michelle, do you have the scripture? Okay. I asked Michelle to read this scripture. Thank you. Yeah, so that scripture really drives home to me that God has uniquely gifted each person and that it's not an accident. In fact, in the Bible, when the disciples come to Jesus, they say, why is that blind man blind? Why was he born blind? What did he do wrong? What was his sin that he should be blind? And Jesus says, that man is blind so that the works of God may be shown in him. And so it's obvious that it's on purpose. It's for a reason, and it's for his glory. Everyone is needed in the church, and we are missing out when there's certain groups of people that aren't here. And wouldn't it be beautiful if you walk into a church building and the people who greet you all look different from each other? Really different people, and some of them have completely different abilities than you. Another passage that I love, the story of the disabled man who Jesus is preaching in Capernaum in a house, and it's just a huge crowd, and he can't get in, and his friends realize he needs Jesus. and they pick him up and they put a hole in the roof and they drop him down. And they're like, "Plop, here he is, Jesus. He wants to meet you." And most of the time, when Jesus, it's not that he doesn't care about people's physical impairments, he does. But more important to him is their sin and that they would be forgiven. And these friends knew that their friend needed forgiveness, and he needed Jesus. And it wasn't easy for him to get to Jesus, so they made a way. Whatever it was, a way that worked for him was the way that they brought him to Jesus. And that's what we're called to do as well. If we pass up, we miss out. I'm not just talking about our church. I'm talking about the global church of Christ. More than 90% of church-going special needs parents said the most helpful support for them is a welcoming attitude toward people with disabilities. But only 80% of those people said that that was happening in their church. People with autism are more likely to be atheist and to reject church entirely. Even though, like I said, autism is for his glory. So we are missing out in that way. Can someone with special needs be saved? Yes. Someone with special needs has a lot of needs, but their greatest need is Jesus. And God created man in his image. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You may not see it happening when you have a child in your Sunday school who has autism. You may not see that reaction, them raising their hand and answering the question straight away, but it's happening. It's just, it looks different. So bottom line is that we must be a church where everyone who attends feels welcomed and has a desire to return regardless of their ability. We want that, and God wants that for our church. Everybody who I know who does, most of my friends who have disabilities, they say a lot of them say they're a Christian. They don't go to church. But those who do go to church, their church loves them. They are like so loved in that church because their church knows them and supports them and cares for them. I had a very special friend. He was autistic. He walked on his toes and he always smiled. And he passed away from a sudden seizure. But he was always singing about Jesus, talking about Jesus. He had a t-shirt and it said, "Ask me about my friend." And on the back it said Jesus. And he would just sing Jesus paid it all. He, just to everyone. And his funeral service was just gospel soaked. It was just the gospel message, the gospel message, the gospel message. Everyone there knew that he loved Jesus. He was a good and faithful servant, and he had severe autism. So if you would like to get involved with people with disabilities, do it. Rainbow Acres is incredible. I teach Zumba there, and it's the most beautiful facility I've ever seen, actually. So it is incredible. It's pro-life. It's a pro-life ministry, and it's important to, especially if you have kids, to show your kids a variety of disabilities. Have these people for dinner in your home. Spend time with them. Talk to them. If you see them in the back row, approach them. Talk to them. Get to know them. They're very chatty, usually. Yeah, so it's huge. When I see someone at a supermarket or whatever, and I see they have a disability, and I go up and talk to them, I say, "What do you do during the day?" Most of the time they say, "Nothing. I just stare at four walls. I watch TV all day." And they don't have social groups, or they don't have, churches to support them. And so, yeah, their lives are less for that. So anyway, I've talked a lot. Now we're going to turn time to Q&A. So Neely and Krista have graciously been their ears are available to you if you have any questions. And you know what? This is a non-judgmental time. So if you have a question that you've always wondered, or you thought that would be way too rude to ask, or whatever, ask it now, because it's your opportunity. So I'll try my best, and they'll try their best. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I don't know
I didn't know her.
She's the sweetest little thing. She, I'm gonna try to make friends with the daddy and her.
That's a great idea.
They, they sing country music for a living.
That's awesome.
And they sing country gospel. They sing Jesus loves me. They sing get you where going.
Awesome. To check them out.
They sing hammer and nails.
Okay, cool. That sounds cool. I do not know them, but I will have to check it out. Think. I'll remember that. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
You know, the one thing Laura taught me,
Yeah.
and I worked at Rainbow Acres for a number of years, but I never considered that the ranchers I worked with knew that they had a problem, or they weren't the same as I was or somebody else. And Laura is the one who taught me. I've got autism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was so enlightening for me, and she helped me a lot with that. And realizing that the ranchers I work with, they know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. That's a really good point.
So, just related to that same topic, we still go on a lot of walks, but we always used to go on even more walks, but we were walking down the road in Colorado, and, she turned around and looked at me and she said, Grandma, should I tell people that I have autism? She was like 10 or 11, and I guess we had kind of realized, her daughter and I had researched it. I mean, my daughter and I had researched it some, and we thought she had Asperger's syndrome, which I still kind of think she does. But they don't define it as that now, they just say she's on the spectrum. But I just never thought about her thinking that she had to keep it to herself. And I said, well, Laura, if you want to tell people, tell them, you know. If that's what you want to do, tell them. So she tells almost everybody now. But referring back to your discussion earlier, I don't want her to define herself by that or other people to, because she's so much more
Yeah.
than that, you know.
Yeah.
I have a question. How can I talk to this boy about his daughter and his wife that's dead and gone?
I don't know. Are you going to write a letter to them?
No, I want to talk to them on the phone like I do my friends in Virginia.
I don't know. You're going to have to teach me how to talk to famous people. I don't know.
I'll start after this service.
You'll have to teach me, Laura.
as a testimony of sorts,
Yeah.
that I'd like all of you to know, the reason we're here, part of this church, and on the board of directors, I am, and help however I can help Scott. The reason we're here is because Pastor Scott accepted Laura.
Yeah.
We had been to several churches that we had no difficulty. And he was so welcoming, so kind, and so adjustable. He wasn't afraid to deal with that. And that's why there's lots of reasons we love it here. But that is to find a place that we could come where we didn't feel like we were lost somewhere else, so we didn't bother.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful testimony.
They don't understand.
We just feel accepted from us, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what this meeting is at the core of it all, is to love people regardless of how God made them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What Julie was saying, I don't think it's a matter of accepting people that have a disability. It's just loving everybody the way they are and knowing
especially true for many people have a disability that you can't see anyway. So just, if you can treat them the same, then a disability that you can see, you should be able to treat the same way. So, yeah.
I have a grandson that was just diagnosed with autism. He's 14, and he's always had difficulty. I never had any clue that he had anything going on, but he's always had difficulty at school connecting with kids, and now he's willing to say that he has autism, and his dad, uh, they've really gone through a lot of studying, et cetera, of how to work with him, but it's still difficult because they have 4 sons total, and but it's interesting to see things now that I know a little bit more that he has difficulty with,
Mm-hmm.
and he's really gifted in music. He started playing guitar and drums when he was like 3, and he plays at church, and they attend a huge church. But it's just so cool to get more information. And I'm thankful that you
Oh, good.
shared.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I just wanted to say that I had a stroke. There are a lot of us that have had something like that. People have called me died. I could speak when I had a stroke, and I come back from that. Not everybody knows that. So it's just delighting when people do accept me.
Yeah.
And you don't know that I had a stroke because I try to be kind of quiet. I don't say a lot. Some people I have something to say to, but there's a lot of people that have problems, and it's not always ability either.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's
Yeah.
why that verse in 1 Corinthians that was read really applies to
Everyone. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever dealt with an autistic child that throws really bad tantrums and bangs their head like on the floor? How do you deal with that? I have a nephew like that.
Oh, yeah. I work with adults, but yes, I've had some scary moments at work. Most of the time, in a church setting, someone with autism is going to have a caregiver or a guardian with them, typically if they have severe behavior issues. I don't suppose you would see them coming here alone. But yeah, I would say just give them space when they're having a moment like that and stay calm. I think that they can read the room, if you're scared or if you're tense or if you start yelling back or whatever, then it's going to escalate.
The tantrum is not the scary thing, it's the banging of the head.
Oh, yeah.
That's scary.
And that's actually that's a coping behavior mechanism that I actually have one client who used to bang her head on the wall to fall asleep at night. So it was like at night the caregiver would just bump, 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 hear that through the room, and it's like I just wish that she would stop doing that. It's just what she did. So I understand that's really hard to deal with, but she's not alone in that. Or your grandson? Nephew? I'm sorry, your nephew isn't alone in that. That is a common, yeah. Yeah, and I have some clients who wear helmets. So yeah, there's lots of different therapies and stuff too that are helpful for that.
I have learned over the years, I've gone from restraint to what I've come to refer to as gentle restraint. And to be able to get somebody to, like before, when she gets really upset, if she'll sit on, get her to sit down, and she'll sit on the chair and lift herself up with her arms like
Mhm.
she for a little while.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, every one of them, this is what's amazing about autism to me is that there's no two exactly.
Right.
Never
Mhm.
two autistic.
Yeah, and what works for one might not work for another. A lot of therapeutic heavy blankets work for a lot of people because they love that heaviness on them. Temple Grandin, you know who Temple Grandin is. She found that lived on a farm, and she would go into the cow stalls and let that cow squeeze her. Yeah, let it squeeze her. Squeeze box. Yeah, yeah. So just don't know what is going to help someone. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a niece who was born with spina bifida. She's in her mid-30s now, but she was at Glendale Community College and she was going to a classroom. Her book bag was on the back of her wheelchair and she has an ultralight and she's small. And she's going uphill and her wheelchair went straight back.
Oh.
And she was trapped in her wheelchair because she's restrained in the front and she's not able to walk and really can't move her legs. And she was on her back like that for 20 minutes.
Oh.
Someone helped her, and finally a lady came and helped her, and it's just, why are we afraid of this?
Right. Yes.
Just get involved.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to know if Laura has a hobby or something she likes to do, or what you like to do that makes you happy.
I I have a so I actually study about different famous people that drank, did drugs, became extremely fat and unhealthy, smoked in their younger days, or just sing country music, southern gospel music, bluegrass music, rock and roll or pop. And then and and one of my favorite bluegrass musicians, his name was Bill Monroe. And he's dead and gone now, but he was born on September 13th, 1911. And he was born with crossed eyes. Everybody in Rosine, Kentucky, including the parents, the kids, and the teachers, made fun of him just for having crossed eyes. And then as he got all grown up, that made it really, really hard for him to make friends, that keep friends, and we think he may have also had autism like me. But no one knows that for sure. But everyone does know that he was born with crossed eyes.
How much time a day do we spend listening to music in our house? I'll tell you, 24. All night we listen to music that helps her go to sleep. We have a song that helps her eat. There's music that cleans her. Chores. We have music.
But
You want to talk about a hobby? It's 20.
repetitive every so I have a so my speech is about the detrimental side effects of drugs and alcohol abuse. I would like at least one of you to come upstairs and listen.
That's awesome.
This coming up Wednesday. And it's going to be about Carter Stanley, who's Ralph Stanley's big brother. He had a bad problem with drinking. And George Jones and Elvis Presley.
Elvis did. Yeah, we know that.
I don't know if you guys caught what she was saying, but she has been invited to share a message with the youth group this Wednesday night.
Aw.
And that's based on what she's been studying with those celebrities who abuse their bodies and they lost out. And she wants
They
the
lost
youth
out on
to know
friends,
the
family.
dangers of those things.
That's awesome.
That's Wednesday service or Wednesday?
Wednesday night during the service, she's sharing that message with the youth group.
Upstairs.
You're too
Yes. Art.
I thought that
Is he interested in coming to church?
Like, yeah, he was, but he's the music, the loud music, and everything else. I've been trying.
Would some headphones? Would some headphones help?
So anyway, now he's been saved.
Oh.
And he, you know, I've asked him about. He said, "I believe in Jesus Christ." But and the weighted blankets. He has two of them.
Hmm.
And he's trying now a little bit, but I mean he drives, and you know, and if you sit down and talk to him, you wouldn't know it.
Yeah, that can be a scary thing for people with autism. I have a client who is a really close friend of mine, and just looking at him, you would have no clue he had any disability at all. He has major cognitive delays, and if he draws you a picture, it's about the age, developmental age of a 5-year-old, the way he draws a picture of a person or something. He carries around a teddy bear, and he carries it everywhere he goes.
These emojis are fried. He's got a ton of them. He'll come walking in the house, and I say, "No, get in." I mean, but
Yeah.
but he doesn't have the mental capacity of a 25-year-old.
And that can be scary when they're independent, and you know, if someone, a stranger, approaches someone who they don't know has a disability and they just say something that can be interpreted rude, I've had a client be beat up, and yeah, so it's scary.
Had fries over in Prescott, and they didn't realize what was going on with him.
Uh-huh.
As things would get hectic, and they'd start putting more pressure on him, he couldn't take it.
Yeah. Same thing also is I have a client who is an African man, and he's severely autistic, and he is like 7 feet tall. His name is Amanze, and he's like this big guy, and you would be afraid of him, but he's nonverbal, and he's like a teddy bear. He's like the sweetest guy ever, but you wouldn't know. Yeah. Well, my question to you then? My question to you and Neely is, how can this church support you?
Scott, did you write down something about sound canceling?
I think just accepting it. I mean, from disability back there, the kids, I go in there, I shake their hands, give them a hug all the time.
Yeah.
You have to accept them for who they are. You can't just say, well, that's the worst thing you can do.
It's really, really difficult. I wish the whole church could understand. It's really almost impossible for Laura to read body language or facial expressions. She doesn't know when somebody is not looking at you that means they're done talking. Or if they're starting to turn a shoulder toward you or giving you indication that they're done with this conversation. They want to move
Yep. That's why clear communication. That's what I was saying about the hugs and stuff.
people are afraid to say, "Okay, Laura, that's enough. Now I'm gonna go over and do this now."
Yeah.
You're not gonna hurt her feelings because she has no idea the way of knowing by looking at your eyes or your facial expressions that you're done listening about Ralph Stanley II.
Yeah. That's good. That's really helpful. Yeah, a lot of people do shy away from saying, "No, I don't want to hug," or "No, I'm all done." Yeah. Yeah. But it's helpful to them.
She doesn't see it as rude. She sees it as helpful.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Talking about this, I've got to go, well, not to be rude or mean, but just, I gotta go do something else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I work with kids with disabilities all the time. I teach high school, and I have many off of your list in my classes. There's no personal space with a lot of them, and you talked about how do you want to be addressed by their name. Look them in the eye when you talk to them, and if the personal space is too small, you need to let them know. Because I have a kid with high functioning autism in my class, and he likes to be right here in my face when he talks to me, but he doesn't want to be touched. So you have to remind them of personal space if that's the case, and like Neely said, you have to let them know
Yeah.
because they can't read like we do. We can tell when someone's irritated or annoyed or has had enough or sad or happy or angry. They don't have that filter like we do. So
And a lot of times they ask. A lot of my clients will say, "Are you happy?" If I'm not bubbly and excited, "Are you happy, Rachel?" And I have to explain. Yes, I'm happy still. Yeah.
You can stand in front of Laura, roll your eyes. Any social, indicator you wanna give her, like,
Yeah.
nobody's there.
Yep.
And if you say, Laura, I'm gonna go over and talk to these people, they need you to talk to them. You go find your grandmother or whatever, she's not gonna be angry at you or her, it wouldn't hurt to.
Yeah.
To help her.
She's asked me if she could come a couple times.
Hmm.
I'll be talking to Laura and I have to, somebody else, she says, can I go? So sure, come on.
Whatever, however you handle it, it's not the same. If you're rude, she would understand rude, but if you're just instructing her, helping her to understand that you're done conversing now, you'd like to talk to somebody, some other people, they need to visit.
Yeah. Yeah. Very helpful.
It helps, well, I worry about it because I see her bebopping from one person to the next person with all the same information.
Yeah.
You know, at Rainbow, I found very much so to not talk down to them like they're
Yeah.
little kids.
Of course.
you
Yeah.
know? And I try to communicate with them just like I would to you.
Yes.
And they appreciate it. And as far as intelligence, I feel very dumb when I'm around a lot of the ranchers there because we've got ranchers there who've been around the world. They know places all around. They memorize everything.
Yeah.
I've gone into a room to work in their room, and I'll move a couple of things to get it out of the way, and I'll put them back exactly where I thought they were, and they'll come back in the room. Oh, it's over about that.
Yep. It's amazing. My favorite thing is when two different people's obsessions butt heads. Okay, so one client will have to like go walk in the bathroom and close the toilet seat, and then the other one will walk in and open the toilet seat and walk away. It's like, oh no, we could do this all day.
We put some new thermostats in some of the buildings. We put new air conditioners on, and the clocks were set for Greenwich time, and I hadn't gotten to them yet. And every time I walked, when are you gonna fix
Yeah.
the clock?
Yeah. 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 Yes.
I had a question, I guess with Laura, or just in general, how is she around animals, pets? I mean, does she relate to them? Has she ever had one, or any?
We have dogs and cats, but like going to the park or somebody, you know,
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be like a friend's pet or one that you've had. I don't
she
know.
has to be convinced that every time she has to be convinced that they're friendly.
So she's a little hesitant.
She's afraid until somebody lets her know, no, this is real friendly. If they bark at her,
Yeah.
she kind of gets all shook up.
Now, can she read, like, I'm trying to get an example. I mean, because sometimes dogs will bark in exuberance, and sometimes they bark like they're going to take your leg off.
She
So,
can't tell the difference.
no.
That's why you always have to convince her that this dog is barking because it's happy. It's not gonna bite you. She doesn't understand the horse, dog's voice any better than she does our facial expression.
A lot of times animals are really therapeutic for people with autism. There's equine therapy that's really helpful for a lot of people. I had a lot of clients with guide dogs or just support animals, and they really helped. So, yeah.
She has a cat that sleeps on her bed every night. Her little buddy.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Answered it, but you know how I've always tried to lower my conversation when talking to children to that age, you know, but that's not so with autistic.
Right. I would speak to them the age that they are. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not really related, but it's how people treat other people. I remember when I was a child, my one of my grandmothers was really deaf, and I remember we'd
Yeah, it is. And I had a client's mother who told me that when they have doctor's appointments, the doctor talks to her instead of the patient, instead of the individual. Like, can she read? It's like, well, ask her. Like, she can answer your question. But it's so common, yeah, for people to speak when they're not.
One thing that I thought was really cool, um, when Pastor Scott had Matt Beard and Art JR come, and the communication that Matt had with Laura, I was
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I liked that too. Anybody else have questions?
I just had something I'd like to add. We lost my older sister 2 or 3 years ago, and she was pretty high functioning, developmentally disabled. And I remember a time whenever I was over to her apartment, and she had her own, she lived on her own and drove her own car and had 2 part-time jobs. And she did very well. And I was over at her house, and I did a lot of cleaning for her at one time. So my wife and I would go over and clean her refrigerator out. Right, it is. But it kind of is it's relating to what I'm about to share is she kept some food that she would eat just before she went to bed, and she'd open her drawer and put it in there and save it for the next day, or I don't really know exactly when she was saving it for, but it would get, sometimes she would forget it was there. So I'm cleaning and I noticed these things, and I asked her, I remember asking her to stop doing that because it's a mess when you go to clean it up, ants and everything else. And she looked at me and she says, "You're not perfect either." And she says, "Do you want everybody to point out everything that you're not perfect about?" She just stuck right
She
up to
laid
her.
that out, yeah.
She said that because she's my older sister. She thought it was her job to straighten me out.
Yeah.
And that just makes me think about a lot of people don't realize that everyone has issues.
Yeah.
They're just different issues than that.
Mhm.
So you know, if you have a big toe that's funny shaped, you don't go around telling everybody or expect to be criticized because you have a crooked big toe.
Mhm.
It's just who we are.
And that's what I always say when in regards to abortion is like when you get asked as a pregnant woman, would you like to have a gestational screening where you can see all the things that might be issues with your baby? Well, why would I want to see that? Because regardless of this child and their abilities or who they are in general, we all have pain in our lives. We all have difficulties. We all have struggles. And just because you have some specific diagnosis doesn't mean it's going to be any harder for you or
And then sometimes the preconceived diagnosis or preconceived idea is incorrect.
is incorrect entirely. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, in the back. Yes. Oh, I should have mentioned that. I meant to say one really great resource is Johnny Erickson Tada. She's a Christian woman who she was like I think 15 years old. She jumped headfirst into a shallow swimming pool and or feet first I think actually, and she's been paralyzed ever since. But she has an incredible ministry for teaching about disabilities and yeah. Was that what you were going to say? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, she's great. Scott, sorry. Scott had something.
Just a point, the disability is the field of God's ability for you to show himself strong.
Yes. Absolutely. I have one really close friend. She calls me most days. She is my oldest client. She's going to be turning 81 this year. She just had her big 80 party. Anyway, she was born at her mom was 20 weeks pregnant with her, and went climbing up Mount Rainier, which is a the biggest mountain in Washington State, and had to be helicoptered out. She went into labor, and Nancy, my friend, was born only 2 pounds. And she didn't have, her eyesight was not developed, so she was born blind, and her spine and her legs were not developed. So she has never been able to walk or see. But she is all there. And if you talk to her like she's not, she'll let you know she is. In fact, she's a motivational speaker, and she charges $25. I keep telling her you can change your rate, but she charges $25, and she speaks to crowds of people, even in university settings, talking about her life growing up as a blind, disabled woman. And she went to a school for the blind, and just all these things, and she's so incredible. But why did I start talking about her? I can't remember how this started. What was it that you shared? Oh, God's strength. And what she says to me all the time is, one day I'm going to run. I'm going to be in heaven. I'm going to run, and I'm going to see. And you know who she's going to see first? Is Jesus. And she cannot wait for that day. And she has taught me so much, but we talk about heaven probably the most of everything we talk about. So, yeah.
Just say to you, thank you.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for having me. I hope it was helpful. Hope it wasn't just like information overload, and hope you got something out of it. Yes, you're welcome.